The environmental activist could not take no for an answer. "Friend, let me tell you a story." "All right." "It's about a simpler time, when many lived a simpler life." "You mean the 70s? "Even before that." "Go on." "Well, there was this woman. She was not a young woman. She was a kindly older woman. She could have been anybody's grandmother. She could have been the grandmother of either Hitler or Gandhi? Well, no, I mean anybody, just as any common person, regardless of fame." "How could she have been both the grandmother of a common Chinese person and a common Scandinavian person?" The environmental activist began to turn a dark red and appeared quite angry. He conceded that the intended audience for his story was a lily-white suburban middle-class stuck-in-the-50s romantic, but that it had a universal message that could easily be adapted to all cultural contexts. Not wanting to upset him further, Arthur sat back and listened. "As I was saying, there was this kindly old woman, and she did not live too far from here, in fact. She lived by herself out in the woods for many years, after her dear, beloved husband passed on." Arthur began to weep. Okay, I understand. Hold on, that's not the point. There's more." Arthur braced for more. "One winter, on a bitterly cold and windy winter's night, as the little old lady sat alone in her cabin, the men in search of profits came trudging through the forest. But alas, they had taken all the healthy trees, and all that remained were trees that were either too sick or too young. So you know what they did?" Arthur edged forward on his rock. "What?" "When the little old lady invited them in for tea and biscuits," a chill ran up his spine as the imagery struck a chord with Arthur's lily-white suburban middle-class stuck-in-the-50s romantic sensibility. "The forest robbers noticed a stack of logs by the fireplace, which, with her arthritic back, it had taken the frail little old lady months to collect last spring." Arthur gasped. "Not 3 days later, the men returned. The little old lady sat warming herself by the fire, knitting a scarf and sipping her tea. The winter's cold, dry air had been more than she'd expected that year, and only a few logs remained. And so she sat as the men crept their way in. Spying the last of her logs by the fire, the men sprang up, snatched the remaining logs, and tore off into the woods, happy with themselves, already thinking about the hefty sums they would reap from the logs once they were turned into jewelry boxes. Later that night, not more than half a mile from this very spot, the wintry cold overcame that little old lady, and she, like so many others, perished at the blood-soaked hands of corporate greed and plunder." Arthur sat inconsolable. "So you see, this is the meaning of our struggle. Either you stand with us and dead grandmothers, or you stand with them, the grandmother killers." "Then there can be no doubt. I am on the side of justice, plant life, and grandmothers." "So you'll join us?" "Certainly. Hand me a padlock." The others cheered as Arthur chained himself to a tree, and the chanting resumed. Soon thereafter, the chanting broke off as the faint echo of chainsaw motors filtered through the forest. Eyeing one another, the environmental activists' resolve was redoubled, and they took up their chants with a renewed, forceful vigor. "Preserve our woodlands! Preserve our woodlands!" The engines from the advancing army of chainsaws grew louder. "No to Wall Street! Yes to hiking trails! No to Wall Street! Yes to hiking trails!" The instruments of plunder were practically upon them. "Hey, hey, ho, ho, wiping out the forest land has got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho, wiping out the forest land has got to go." Suddenly, through the brush and thickets, the chainsaw-toting, tobacco-chewing, anti-nature arm of corporate rape and plunder came into view. Arthur seethed. There was no holding him back. "Halt, you grandmother killers!" Arthur bellowed. "Your despicable acts of greed and avarice on behalf of the heartless corporate bottom-liners ends here." There were 5 men in all. They cut off their chainsaws and made their way over to the defenders of timber. One of the 5 immediately went for his cell phone. The other sat and waited. Apparently he was calling some big-shot corporate official to get the okay to continue with their ravenous destruction of the forest, even at the cost of wasting a few tree huggers. Arthur pictured the soulless profiteer sitting in some posh 110th floor office, looking out over the glass and concrete-choked skyline, barking out orders to clear out that section of the forest land, or go ahead and starve Barbie, because sales need to restock the inventory. The tree killer put away his phone and explained to the others that they'd have to wait for a call back. Arthur and the environmental activists resumed their chanting. "Tree killers! Tree killers! Dirty, rotten nature destroyers!" The leader of the anti-forest corporate mercenaries made his way over to the group chained to the trees. "Nice day," he tried. "Yeah, nice day for putting an end to greedy scum of the earth like the worms who handle the chainsaws of death and mayhem," Arthur shot back. "Whoa, well, cancel my subscription to Popular Mechanics and get me on the next jet plane back to the Stone Age. Looks like we've got ourselves a genuine nature boy." "Well, I guess, yeah, something like that." Arthur was slightly confused, but remained resolute. "The point is, we value natural beauty above corporate profit." "Is that right?" Yeah. You see a forest, and you see jewelry boxes, and designer canoes, and other stuff made out of wood. And what do you see when you see a jewelry box or other stuff made out of wood? The mangled remains of a butchered corpse," Arthur answered. "Well, the way I see it, I'll take a good cigar box over a walk in the woods any day. What do you think of that?" "Why, Arthur had to hold himself back. This posed little difficulty since he was chained to a 200-foot tree. The other environmental activists tried to calm him down, explaining that the corporate mercenary was trained in techniques to incite environmental activists, coaxing them to unchain themselves and chase after them. This was exactly what they wanted, so they could get on with their destructive ways. Arthur smirked and stared coldly into the gritty smile of the conniving mercenary.